This is my presentation for the Permaculture Women's Guild Permaculture Design Certificate. I'll be sharing a bit about my design and our new homestead that so far we're calling Hill to Creek Homestead. I'm Kerrie, and I'm coming to you from the ancestral and unceded lands of the Sankotan and Hul'qumi'num speaking peoples, also known as Salt Spring Island, here in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada. My husband and I and our 2 kids, who we homeschool, moved here 6 months ago in the middle of my PDC. A little bit more about me. I'm really passionate about taking care of our planet and our communities. And I'm a scientist by training. My expertise is in sustainable fisheries planning. And I really love weaving together local and traditional knowledge with scientific research to solve problems. Over the past 3 years, I've been reevaluating what a right livelihood would look like for me. I become really curious about what happens when we listen to and act from our wild inner voices. The insights that I gained from this work have guided me to change careers, and they also inspired our family to buy land and move here to Salt Spring. As part of all that, I created trustingwilder.com, a website where I'm sharing stories about what I'm learning about regenerative living, home learning, and well-being. Growing food and building community around it has brought me so much joy and sanity, especially recently. When I feel overwhelmed by the scale of our global crises, working in small groups of people to grow food feels right. Stumbling into permaculture feels pretty magical, the timing of it all and how it weaves together so many things I love. Permaculture's solutions-focused systems approaches to regenerative design I love. It's creating joyful and resilient and authentic lives and livelihoods and communities. And another thing that really resonates with me is that it helps me remember that nature is one of my wisest teachers. In terms of what our design thesis and vision statement are, our choice to move from the city of Vancouver to this island community and create a homestead also feels like a practical thing we can do in a time where so much feels gloomy and out of our control. This picture of the plantain plant here reminds me that we're recent settlers here on Salt Spring. And I think a lot about how to respect and appropriately interact with this new place. Robin Wall Kimmerer's description of looking to our plant teachers for models really resonates with me. She talks about becoming naturalized to a place like the plantain, being a good neighbor, making it better, like the plantain has done here in North America, although it too is an immigrant. With that in mind, we want to create a regenerative homestead that's habitat for our family. We'll grow as much of our own food and medicine as we can, while also protecting local biodiversity and habitats. Conserving, recharging, and protecting our water resources is also especially important to us. We envision a place where we can live, learn, work, play, create, gather, and heal in connection with nature, and share the abundance of this place with others. Today, I'll focus on our goals. We have a whole list here, but today I'm going to focus on our goals to store water and grow food and medicine for humans. So here we are in space. We're in the Pacific Northwest on an island in the Salish Sea that's in the rain shadow of the coastal mountains. We have a relatively Mediterranean-like climate, because we're in zone 8B, and we do get frost and snow, but not for very long. We get plenty of rain, about 40 inches in a year, but it mostly falls between November and February, so we can have flooding in the winter and drought in the summer. Another important detail about our island is that our only drinking water comes from rainwater that charges the island's aquifer. And we're starting to experience water shortages, and these things are only going to worsen with climate change. In terms of the human history here, First Nations have stewarded and relied on the bounty of especially the marine environment for millennia. Farming began here in the 1800s, and Salt Spring's known for its fruit production, its artist community that's quite vibrant, and its farmers and artists in markets. The idea that we own this land still doesn't really sit well with me. It's a thing that I'm working with. And as part of that, we plan to share the bounty of this place with others. The 3D image that you see here on the bottom right shows our land outlined in a little dashed line at the pointing where the pointy arrow is. We're in the middle of the island in a large watershed surrounded by ridges. In June 2021, we moved to a rental house off this site, but on the island from Vancouver, the big city. And in September, we started building a house on the land. This land is a sloping 5 acres covered mostly in coastal Doug fir forest, and it's bordered by a year-round creek. There's an existing cleared area in the middle that's south-facing, which is perfect for solar power and food forests and gardens. We have a major road on one end of our land and 3 direct neighbors. The previous family that lived here built a deer fence around their garden, a grape arbor, and multiple driveways. They planted a few fruit trees and grapes, and they built or installed a septic tank and a shallow well. Here's a map of our zones, and I'm going to walk you through them with pictures. Zone 1 will be centered on our new house, and this photo shows the construction of the foundation. It's also going to have our driveway and car and bike parking, kitchen gardens, kids gardens, chickens, bees, kids play area, and tree fort, a fire pit, and compost bins. Zone 2 will have food forests on the steep slopes, and I'll talk about more in a minute. It's hard to represent the slope accurately in these pictures, but my husband is wheelbarrowing our son on the bottom left here up the steepest bit, and that kind of gives you a sense of it. In zone 3, there'll be a hedgerow. There's already an existing shed. We're going to turn that area into more of a celebration space. We'll have a pollinator meadow and some domestic rainwater storage. Zone 4 is going to remain this forested area. It's a coastal Doug fir forest. You can see pictures there of the bottom left is a beautiful maple and the bottom right is an arbutus. Zone 5 will be a riparian zone around the creek, which is wet and muddy and pretty swampy year round. In terms of sectors, there's a number of natural influences that we'll need to consider in our design. And today I'm going to focus on the strongest or most impactful ones, which for us are sun aspect, slope, and the associated water movement. The area that most of our design is going to focus on is this open area surrounded by the forest. It's oriented mostly south and downhill, making especially the top of it very sunny right around where the house is. The tall trees surrounding the open area cause the bottom to have more shade, especially with the low sun angles in the winter. The land is really steep, up to 45 degrees in places, and it slopes down from the road and toward the creek. The soil is mostly clay with some sand at the top of the hill, and it increases in organic matter as you move down the hill. It's also been really disturbed, especially at the top of the open area, by excavation for building the house. Water mostly flows down the slope with the slope of the land, but we want to understand it in more detail, and we need to observe that before we think about things like adding ponds. Because we haven't been living on the site, right now we're renting elsewhere, but for much of the previous year, we haven't been able to visit as much as we'd like to because of COVID travel restrictions. The social and invisible structures that will be most important for us are that because we're new to this community, we're really low on social capital here. We need to build it. All of our financial capital comes from a single outside income, and also that there are rules and regulations or limitations on where and how we can legally build our homestead. If we zoom in on zone 1 and 2 in that open area, the major patterns in microclimates are that the top of the open area is hot and dry and the bottom is cool and wet. I'm not going to go into more detail here because as we build our house and shape the land, these microclimates and edges will change, and so we'll continue to observe them and incorporate that into our designs. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into a bit about the design of our homestead. I'm going to focus on the solutions to slope and water, zooming in on that steep slope that's downhill from where we're building our house. I really took to heart the course message about the importance of plant your water first. Also, since water is such a limited resource here, it's become the highest priority system in the design of our house. So we're going to shape the land to set it up to passively slow spread and sink water. This graph that I drew shows sort of a side view of my plan to have just below the house a flat recreation area for the kids to run around, followed by this series of banks and flat paths that will go down the hill. We'll plant a food forest on the banks to stabilize them, and the flat paths will make the area more accessible for wheelbarrows and for us as we age. and they'll also help to slow and sink the water. I drew inspiration for our earthworks from other terrace gardens here on the island. The whole island is pretty hilly. Also from Sepp Holzer's alpine food forests and Hannah Maloney's steep slope urban forest. We're planning on using Hannah's version of, it's kind of like a check log terrace slope stabilization technique where the earth is shaped into banks and flats, and then we lay wood as a frame to hold cover crops. She used wood pallets. We're going to use scraps from the construction of our house and wood from our forest. Then we'll plant our food forest and eventually on top of all that, and the wood will rot away. And by then the trees and other plant roots will have grown enough, hopefully, to stabilize the slope. Here's what that design looks like in map form. I want to emphasize that obviously I'm new at earthworks, and I really do take them seriously. I take them lightly. This is my current best guess for design that will solve problems that I see before me and make use of the resources that we have. It's a draft plan, and I'm going to discuss more with experienced earthworkers closer to the spring. These are the folks that we're going to work with to implement this design. Linked with the earthworks design is our plan for water. We are legally allowed to have rainwater and gray water systems here, but we have to have plans designed by professionals to pass the building code. So I've developed these plans in collaboration with the 2 local experts that you see listed there. This map shows 2 systems, rainwater collection and the gray water. The rainwater collection, the roofs of our house will collect rain, and the car park will as well. And it will get stored in above ground tanks and distributed back to the house where it will be filtered for domestic use. We'll also use it to feed our hose bibs. We have separate tanks for irrigation that will connect to our annual veggie garden and our kitchen garden. The overflow from those, the irrigation tanks will go back into the domestic use tanks. The other system is our gray water. We have 2 bathrooms in the house, and both will have waterless toilets. Building of a new house with waterless toilets. I'm excited about that choice because it means we get to do a few things. It means we cut our water budget by 1/3. It means we have to store less rainwater. We produce no black water because we'll compost human manure, which will eventually feed our soil and allow us to grow more plants and sequester more carbon. It also allows us, having waterless toilets, to make use of the septic system instead of digging it up and replacing it with a new one. The other part of our gray water system deals with these 2 different kinds of gray water. Dark gray water, which is stuff that's mixed with food from the kitchen sink and the dishwasher. Those will go directly to the septic system all year. That's what we're required to do to pass code. And in the summer, the light gray water, which is bathroom sinks and showers and baths, will go to our younger fruit trees downhill and our food forest. In the winter, all the gray water will go to the septic system. To bring this all together, we're going to plant our food forest on top. Starting uphill at our house, we'll walk down our deck stairs to a flat area for the kids to play that we'll plant with micro clover, which is a lawn alternative. We're also going to have a fire pit and a rounded bench along the edge for fun full moon celebrations and nighttime meditations. As we go down the hill from there, the first slope will be the steepest and where we'll grow our tallest fruit trees, mulberry and pear. And these trees will also provide shade in the heat of summer. Next to the top stairs, we're going to build a slide for the kids. And since it's so hot and sunny, we're going to build an arbor over there that will provide some shade, and then we can grow a variety of flowers and vine fruits like kiwi and grape. We'll stabilize the slopes in between the trees with plants like lupin and dandelion, lavender and clover, and underplant with nutrient accumulators, insectaries, and mulch plants. I put all the details in the slide here, so I won't read through them here. We're going to interplant with the trees with bushes like gumi and autumn olive and elderberry. Our aim is to turn this eroded, inaccessible slope into a stable food forest that produces food for humans, birds, insects, and other critters, habitat for them and us, mulch, medicine, and captures carbon. We'll also reuse domestic water, filtering it before releasing it downhill to the stream. To implement this plan for the 2 design goals that I've described in this presentation, we're going to focus on different design goals in different seasons or phases. First, over the winter, I'm going to rest and celebrate completing this course. And then in the spring, I'll shift to continuing to connect with our new community, getting our house built, doing earthworks, planting the food forest area with cover crops. This summer, we'll move into our new house and begin to observe more closely how deer and water move across our land. We're going to add some bees, prepare to start growing annual vegetables, and in the fall, we'll plant our food forest. Over the following year, we'll begin growing annual veggies, get some chickens, and revise our plans, future plans based on our deeper observations gained from living on the land. From winter 2023 and beyond, we'll add edible hedgerow to share with our neighbors. We're going to consider building ponds and build a roadside farm stand to sell and share our harvests and creations. Our kids are really excited about this possibility. As we move into later phases of implementation, I see us shifting our focus from establishing our homestead to supporting our community's existing efforts on climate action and community building efforts on, local food systems. Again, we're settlers here, we're new here, so we're going to observe, listen, and offer help. To end, I just want to leave you with this image of the sun rising over the steamy Salish Sea and its islands. And I took this on an early morning ferry ride. It reminds me that new beginnings are very exciting, they can be beautiful, and they're usually uncomfortable. I also want to say a very big thank you to all the inspiring women that I've met and learned from over the past year during this course. Thank you to Heather Jo Flores for creating and coordinating such an incredible body of information. I really appreciate how accessible the format is to those of us who want to learn, but also have to fit that learning into other things like going on, kids and jobs and pandemics. Thank you to my family who've been learning permaculture along with me and who've taken over many of my duties, allowing me to hide away and study and do designs. And thank you to my mentor, Lucy Bardos, who's been really supportive and encouraging. Thank you.